Maya Angelou once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I want you to sit back, relax, buckle up. This one is going to take a few minutes, but it's worth your time.
These are a couple of basic things, and the Democrats are saying this is the greatest voter suppression movement in history. Here's the reason. Minnesota shows you this. New York City shows you this. If they don't have illegal aliens voting, or if they don't have these phony migrants that are here on these phony programs that are at the polls, and you're damn right, we're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen. And that's why I'm so proud of what President Trump is doing.
There you go. Steve Bannon just told us the plan. That's not a clip from after the 2020 election. It's not a clip from 2025. Even that is a clip from today, February 3rd, 2026. And now that we know that that plan is out in the open, as many of us suspected, we need to look back in order to understand how we move forward. When Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, he skulked off back to Mar-a-Lago, where he continued to behave inappropriately like a politician. And there he did things like host Netanyahu and other world leaders. He made sure he started gathering his team, Stephen Miller, who had long been by his side, Steve Bannon, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, all of the key players, even Fox News host Pete Hegseth. For 4 years, they had time to scheme and to plan as to how they were going to get Trump back in office, but then also how they were going to make sure that he stayed there no matter what. No matter what the 2026 midterm elections turned out, and absolutely no matter how the 2028 presidential election played out, because I can promise you, Donald Trump is going to have to go out of that White House either feet first, or he's going to have to be dragged out in handcuffs, because he knows the minute he is not president anymore, a bunch of federal cases open back up for him. Plan A was to gerrymander, redistrict, work with Republican lawmakers, and make sure that they were working in their home states to make sure that these redistricting maps were drawn in such a way that Republicans would ultimately win elections and have more seats when it came to the House of Representatives. However, unexpectedly, blue states started fighting back, and they weren't taking them to court or anything. They were simply saying, okay, you want to redistrict? We'll redistrict too. And California went so far as to put that special item on their ballot, and Californians voted yes to go ahead and redistrict, to attempt to have more seats in the House of Representatives. And since then, as you can see as of today, February 3rd, 2026, out of Black Voice News, they are still battling this back and forth because the Republicans tried to block California's new congressional map. And the courts were like, no, it's legal. So clearly Plan A is off the table. They're not going to redistrict their way into maintaining power of all three branches of government. So they move to Plan B. And Plan B requires the use of federal goons. Okay, they start by looking at blue cities and blue states, and Minnesota becomes this sort of testing ground for really ramping up the intimidation, the violence, and let's be honest, at this point, the murder of people in the streets. And then what happens is really interesting because there's no hard, cold evidence to prove that this is connected. But tell me why this wouldn't be connected. The end of January rolls around, and Minnesota is simply a war zone. There's no other way to describe it. We've got the National Guard on standby. Tim Walz is deploying them to, support citizens and make sure people are safe. It's looking like it's possible that the military is going to come in at the direction of Donald Trump, and then you're going to have this crazy situation where the National Guard is going to have to fight, our military. It's, rumors of civil war. It's out of control, right? And so all of a sudden, Attorney General Pam Bondi says, wait a second, I think the link between all of this violence must have to do with the voters because, you have so many illegal people, illegal criminals that are voters in your state. It's like a really weird link, right? And so she says, here's how we're going to solve this. You give me your voting records from the state, which is highly illegal, by the way, and then I'll make sure that ICE just disappears. We've got like a quid pro quo offering, which again is illegal. And Minnesota says, no, that's not going to happen. So let's review. Plan A was the redistricting, the gerrymandering. That didn't work out. Plan B was to have somehow grab hold of the voting records, the voting rolls. That's not happening. So where does that land us? Plan C is very simple. Use the billionaires. Okay, this is Patrick Byrne, and what you need to know about Patrick Byrne is a number of things. Stay with me, it's all going to make sense at the end. Patrick Byrne, from 1999 until 2019, was the CEO of Overstock.com. He's a billionaire. And in 2019, he suddenly had to resign from his position because it was found out that he was having a romantic relationship with a woman named Maria Butina, who ended up pleading guilty to acting as an unregistered agent of the Russian government. She was literally a Russian spy, and she was utilizing Byrne, this guy here, to get direct access to influential, high-level politicians in the Republican Party and other organizations, including the NRA. When confronted about all of this, Byrne said, hey, listen, the FBI knew that I was with her, and they actually encouraged the relationship because I was going to engage in some counterintelligence and get information out of her, which all turned out to be bogus. So Maria, she goes to prison, she does her time, and then she's deported back to Russia. That little bit of information is important because you need to understand he has ties to Russia. Okay, so 2020 happens, the election happens, and Joe Biden is named president. Now, Byrne, he goes ahead and he aligns himself with Sidney Powell, Michael Flynn, and Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is the guy at the beginning of this video who said, yo, you bet your bottom dollar we're going to have ICE everywhere at the polling locations. And he, Byrne here, started publicly claiming that voting machines had flipped from Trump to Biden without any evidence. A lot goes on. Like I said, the guy's a billionaire. He starts funding all of these bogus investigations into elections in various locations, and that doesn't work. So what happens is it is December of 2020. We know that in January of 2021, Joe Biden is going to be inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States. And so Byrne is like, yeah, we're still not going to go down without a fight. So he holds a meeting in the Oval Office with Donald Trump and others like Steve Bannon, etc. And he proposes and advises that they do the following. Number one, Donald Trump is to declare a national emergency, really moving a lot of powers over to him. Number two, they are going to seize a whole bunch of voting machines in an attempt to, I guess, quote unquote, prove that Donald Trump won the 2020 election, although we know there's a whole bunch of cheating and manipulation that would go on in that case. And then number three, if all else fails, just don't leave the White House. National emergency, seize the voting machines, don't leave the White House. That is Patrick Byrne's idea of how to move forward. The likes of Patrick Byrne is the key to Donald Trump finally getting his way. He is someone who is a billionaire and provides everything on top of that money that Donald Trump relies on. Those two extra things in addition to money are ideological certainty, this belief that 2020's election was stolen, as well as a willingness to cross lines that should not be crossed without hesitation. Patrick Byrne has already proved his loyalty once to Trump by running that meeting in December of 2020. Trump knows that he is willing to go the extra mile, even into places that are illegal. And this is the perfect setup for Donald Trump because in theory, now we know because of Nuremberg this is not true, but in theory he can sit back and say, I had nothing to do with that. None of my cabinet had anything to do with it. No one else in the Republican Party had anything to do with it. It was Patrick Byrne. They'll send him to prison and Donald Trump will pardon him. It's the last and final plan. And we, the American people, need to make sure that that does not happen.